The inn was deserted. On a bench in a corner sat a young woman with circles under her eyes, turned modestly to one side. She nursed an infant. A man, possibly her husband, dozed next to her, his broad shoulders resting against the wall. In the shadows behind the stove sat another person which a Plegat could not quite distinguish. The innkeeper raised his head, saw a Plegat, and, upon noticing his uniform and the iron coat of arms on his chest, frowned momentarily. A Plegat was used to this kind of welcome. He was a royal messenger, and as such had the unquestioned right to a fresh mount. The royal decrees were explicit. In every town, village, inn, and country, messengers had the right to a fresh horse, and woe betide those who failed to comply. Messengers, of course, left their own mount behind and issued a receipt for the new one, which the innkeeper could present to the local mayor for compensation. But things could get rather differently. As well, messengers were always viewed with fear and suspicion. Will he, won't he? Will he take our precious to her doom, our little sparrow, barely weaned, or our beloved little crow? A Plegat had seen it before, children sobbing as their favorite horse was saddled and led from the stable, clinging to their playmate. More than once he saw the faces of adults pale at the injustice, at their helplessness. "I don't need a fresh horse," he said brusquely. He had the impression that the innkeeper breathed a sigh of relief. "I just need to eat, because the road really did me in." "Got something in that pot of yours?" "There's a bit of soup left. I'll bring it right away. Have a seat. Will you be staying with us tonight? It's already getting dark." A Plegat thought for a moment. 2 days earlier he had met Handsome, a messenger he knew, and as per usual orders, they exchanged missions. Handsome was carrying letters and a message for King Demavend, and he took off at great speed through Temeria and Mahakam towards Wengenberg. As for a Plegat, having taken the mail for King Visimir of Redania, he continued towards Oxenfurt and Tredagor. He still had more than 300 miles to cover. "I'll eat and then I'll be on my way," he decided. "It's a full moon and the road is clear enough. Your choice." The soup he was served was thin and had little flavor, but the messenger didn't notice such details. At home, he savored his wife's cooking. At work, he ate what he was given. He ingested his meager meal slowly, holding his spoon rather awkwardly, with fingers stiff from holding the reins. A cat who had been dozing on the bench near the stove raised its head suddenly and hissed. "King's messenger?" A Plegat shuddered. The question came from the man who had only a moment before been sitting in shadow. Now suddenly close to the messenger. His hair was white as milk, plastered to his forehead by a leather headband, and he wore a black jacket covered in silver studs, as well as heavy boots. Above his right shoulder shone the pommel of his sword, which he wore across his back. Where does your road take you? Where, where does your road take you? Wherever the royal will take me, replied a Plegat coldly. He never answered such question any differently. The man with the white hair was quiet for a while, watching the messenger intently. His face was abnormally pale, with strangely dark eyes. The royal will, he said finally, his voice unpleasant, a bit hoarse. Probably orders you to make haste. You are no doubt anxious to be on your way. And how does that concern you? Who are you to rush me? I am nobody, said the man with the white hair, with a horrible smile. And I am not rushing you, but if I were you, I'd get out of here as quickly as possible. I wouldn't want anything to happen to you. For such statements, a Plegat had another well-worn reply, short and sweet, calm and composed, but leaving no doubt by whom a royal messenger was employed and the punishment which met anyone daring to touch even a single hair on his head. But something in the man with the white hair's voice convinced a Plegat not to use that reply. I've got to let my horse rest a bit, sir. An hour, maybe two. I understand. The man with the white hair nodded, then turned his head as if to listen to something outside. A Plegat listened too, but all he could hear were the crickets. Rest then, said the man with the white hair as he adjusted the belt on his scabbard, which crossed his chest. But don't go out into the yard, no matter what happens. Don't go outside. A Plegat refrained from asking any questions. He knew instinctively that it was best not to. He leaned over his bow and continued fishing for the few pieces of ham floating on the surface of his soup. When he looked up again, the man with the white hair was gone. A moment later, there was a neighing. There was the neighing of a horse and the hammering of horseshoes in the yard. 3 men entered the inn. When he saw them, the innkeeper began feverishly wiping his tankard. The woman with the nursling moved closer to her husband, who was dozing and woke him with a jab of her elbow. Discreetly, a Plegat moved the stool where he had set his belt knife close to him. As they approached the counter, the men looked over their hosts and sized them up. They walked slowly, causing their spurs and weapons to jingle. Welcome, gentlemen. The innkeeper cleared his throat and spoke. What can I get you? Hooch, said one of the men, short and squat, with long arms like a monkey. He wore two crossed Zerikanian sabers on his back. Want some, Professor? Gladly. Uh, ac- accuse. Acquise. Uh, acquiesced the second man as he adjusted his spectacles made of polished crystal with bluish reflections and gold frames which were hooked nose planted on his hooked nose. As long as the alcohol is unadulterated unadulterated, the innkeeper served them. A Plaggett noticed that his hands were trembling slightly. The men stood with their backs to the counter. They sipped the contents of their clay mugs unhurriedly.